Marco Polo. Marco, who traveled around from Europe to Asia, was born in 1254 in Venice. His dad and uncle, Niccolò and Maffeo, were merchants of Venice. Niccolò traded in the Middle East for a long time. As a result, he gained significant wealth and a good reputation. For their trade business, they had to travel to different areas. Marco became an explorer with help from Niccolò and Maffeo. Venice was one of the central cities in Europe. Italy became rich by trading with Asian countries. The Venetian merchants and foreign traders chose Constantinople as a trade location with Asia. It was located at the end of the western side of the Black Sea. Therefore, Constantinople became an important city for connecting Europe with Asia. Arabian merchants brought incense, silk, jade, and other goods from China and India. These goods were purchased by rich Europeans for over hundreds of years. However, nobody dared to travel to Asia to buy the goods directly there because the journey was very dangerous. There were hot deserts, cruel bandits, and violent tribes. It was Niccolò and Maffeo who traveled to the east for the first time. They left Venice in 1253. They had traveled around Constantinople before, but they wanted to explore new regions there. They wanted to trade with the nomads in the upper region of the Black Sea. Since Niccolò was away for a long time, Marco had to live with his mom alone. He learned how to trade and how to set prices in foreign currency from his mom. Shortly after, his mom died of an illness. Therefore, Marco was raised by his aunt, Flora. Meanwhile, Niccolò and Maffeo grew tired of living in Bukhara. One day, Kublai Khan's envoy arrived in Bukhara. They were surprised to see two strange Europeans. The envoy was on his way to Kublai Khan's palace. Since Kublai Khan was interested in the West, the envoy invited Niccolò and Maffeo to join him. Kublai welcomed them warmly. Niccolò and Maffeo became good friends with Kublai Khan. They traveled around famous places in Yuan. They also accepted Asian culture. In 1269, they decided to return to Venice. Kublai Khan gave them a special travel pass as a goodbye gift. It allowed them to travel anywhere because it was a protection from the emperor. Marco was 15 when they came back to Venice. Marco was happy to see his dad. After listening to their exciting stories, Marco also wanted to travel. Niccolò and Maffeo wanted to go back to the palace because they missed their times back there. Therefore, they decided to visit Yuan again. This time, Marco, who was 17, went with them. They risked their lives to go to Yuan. Marco didn't realize this trip would take another 20 years. He missed Venice, and it was hard traveling all the time. However, seeing new things and foreign land gave him strength. Through the journey, Marco recorded everything he experienced. They were all tired from walking the desert for too long. While walking, they saw a mirage. They had to see things straight if they didn't want to die. They arrived in the Pamirs, a northern region of Persian Gulf. The mountains of the Pamirs were extremely high, as much as 6,000 meters. Travel became much harder for Marco and his group. In fact, all travelers had difficulty passing through the Pamirs. Since the lack of air made it difficult to start a fire, it took a long time to cook. Finally, they hit one more obstacle before arriving at Yuan, the Gobi Desert. It was one of the biggest deserts in the world. Marco Polo. Before leaving, they made preparations for food and for their camels. After passing through Persia and Afghanistan, their journey was about to begin. There was a rumor that ghosts appeared in the desert. According to the rumor, anyone who enters the desert could hear someone calling his or her name. Marco suddenly felt nervous. Marco heard ghosts screaming loudly at night. He shivered with fear. However, it turned out that the noise came from rocks that were warmed by the sun during the day. After 3.5 years, they finally arrived in Yuan. It had been 9 years since Niccolò and Maffeo had been in Yuan. Once again, Kublai Khan warmly welcomed them. Marco looked around the country. To him, everything was interesting. He was excited to see different hair colors and clothing styles. Everything was new to him in Yuan. People in Yuan also watched Marco carefully. Kublai Khan gave them a house to live in. He wanted them to be his servants. Kublai Khan told them to give him a report of his people. This showed how passionate he was about his people. With help from the emperor, Marco was able to observe many cities in Yuan. Marco reported each region's history, customs, and interesting stories of the people. After a while, Marco, Niccolò, and Maffeo thought it was time for them to leave Yuan. Although Kublai Khan didn't want them to leave, he felt that they couldn't stay any longer either. Kublai Khan had a daughter, Princess Kokachin. She was planning to marry Arghun Khan from ʻmɑrkoʊ. Before they left, Kublai Khan asked them to take his daughter to ʻmɑrkoʊ for him. They had stayed in Yuan for 17 years. Now, they were leaving by boat to ʻmɑrkoʊ. On the ship, there were 600 people, and for 2 years' worth of survival supplies. Their voyage took place on the Indian Ocean and along the southwest of Sri Lanka. Only 18 people survived from the rain, wind, and the sea. Luckily, the princess arrived safely. In 1295, they finally arrived in Venice. Nobody recognized 40-year-old Marco, who had left for China when he was 17. Everyone thought he was dead. Meanwhile, a war between Genoa and Venice broke out. Marco volunteered for the Venetian Navy. He was appointed to an honorable vessel, galley. His long-time experience in the sea was highly praised. Marco even won the battle with Genoa. However, Marco was eventually imprisoned in a San Giorgio castle in Genoa. Although Niccolò and Maffeo tried to rescue Marco, they failed. Marco spent his days talking about Yuan to his fellow prisoners. Every day, prisoners gathered to listen to his adventures. Telling stories helped him pass the time while he was in prison. One of the prisoners was named Rustichello, and he was a writer from Pisa. He had been in prison for 10 years and was fascinated by Marco's stories. Rustichello asked Marco to tell more stories of the East. Using Marco's stories, they decided to write a book together. When Marco told him stories, Rustichello wrote them down. Rustichello named the title of the book The Travels of Marco Polo. They became good friends. Their work was finished in the spring of 1299. In 1299, the war between Venice and Genoa was over. A year later, Marco was freed. Marco and Rustichello said goodbye to each other. Marco brought a copy of their work from him. When Marco returned, his book sold rapidly. The Venetians were surprised because nobody had ever traveled such far distances before. It was their first time reading about traveling. Marco soon became famous. He died on the 8th of January in 1324 at the age of 70. After he died, his book continued to open a new world for people.